In February 2020, I was invited to the launch of the latest iteration in what is basically a classic lineup of cameras from Fujifilm, one that inspired a lot of us to get into the Fujifilm X system. And of course, we're talking about the X100V, and I enjoyed it so much that honestly, I almost walked out of the launch party with the camera. It just felt that right in my hands, having owned the X100S. I then went on to miss my train. I had to pay a lot to get the final train back to Birmingham, and yeah, bit of a saga, but definitely fun. Fast forward a few months and here we are filming this intro with the X100V, ready to take a more sensible, cold-headed, less excitable look at the camera. So let's take a quick look at what's new. I'm out and about shooting random sample shots. You'll probably see stuff from Stratford Upon Avon, the home of Shakespeare, although I think he's away today. I might even throw up some shots of the gardener for the crack, and yeah, we'll have a little chat about it afterwards. Something that always impresses me when I pick up a camera in the X100 range is how it feels, the build quality, but more importantly, maybe the premium touches, those little things that show that thought has really gone into a camera like this without gushing all over the camera. You know, you've got the lens cap that is lined inside. You've got the texture across the dials. Even now, I don't recall it being there before, but might have been. On the on-off switch, you've got the texture there, which all matches, even with the manual focus ring and the aperture ring right there. As we're looking at the lens, we do have a 23mm f2 still, which is fine. I've been thinking about that, and maybe that is the right choice. Well, it's been going for 5 generations now, so, you know, it's the right choice. But this one has been redesigned, so we're hoping to see less haze up close, wide open, and better corner performance. And to all intents and purposes, the shots that I've done with this in the previous months, I have definitely seen that, and you've probably seen similar in comparisons online. We have a 4-stop ND filter now, which is programmed here. You can customize a lot of these functions to other buttons or effectively mute certain buttons so they don't do anything. You've got the lever there and these buttons. I'm not a big fan of these buttons. I don't mind the placement, and I guess I don't mind the feel too much, but they just feel cheap. And this right in here, I don't know, something about that just doesn't excite me. But yeah, it works, it's functional, that's absolutely fine. Bear in mind, one of the big new features is this very useful tilting touchscreen, and you've got a little notch in here to access it. It doesn't take up much space. This camera isn't designed for a vlogger, of course, but a video shooter can squeeze some serious juice out of this with the 4K 30 frames per second up to 200 megabits per second. In fact, you get an Eterna file, 8-bit F-log internal, which can be very good, maybe arguably overkill for the usual purpose of this camera range, but very excellent addition these days, I think. In fact, you'd have seen that I decided to use it to shoot the intro, and arguably I could probably shoot every bit of this video. It's not particularly video intensive or difficult. This camera could easily handle it. Of course, you might want to use a monitor by using the HDMI port there. You can monitor the audio via a USB-C adapter, and also, of course, use that USB-C for charging on the go. You've got a 2.5mm mic port, so you're going to need an adapter if you're going to use that. Again, not really designed for your vlogging types or even your hardcore video types, but, you know, it could be used. Bear in mind, it's not weather sealed unless you buy the additional filter adapter and filter. Now this thing, as we said, premium, and you know, from time to time we moan about prices going up and whatnot. It is currently $12.99. I should say that again, it's currently £1,299. 5 iterations old. Is it still the classic premium compact APS-C camera? Let's crack on and see how we fare with this. I mean, I already know, but I want to hear from you. So let me summarize after some quick sample shots. Near silent leaf shutter, beautiful Fujifilm JPEGs, and solid classic build quality, plus a sharper, more worthy lens and that very handy tilt screen. What's not to like? Well, there are a few little design choices that didn't excite me, but nothing to put me off. Like we saw with the 2 buttons on the rear, and one I didn't mention when we looked up close, the word HDMI on the side. It's discreet, but it doesn't need to be there. However, the biggest thing design-wise that I do really miss at the moment is the D-pad. But I understand why it's not there. And there you go, it's one of those things. Otherwise, it's a fairly clean, very classic look, and definitely a serious bit of metal. Now, if you've owned the previous model, you'll pick it up and carry on exactly where you left off. It really is a great little upgrade, although the previous models are still solid options for stills shooting. The all-important IQ is better than before. I find it sharper, more usable up close around f2, and of course you've got the very, very nice color rendering that we've come to expect, and micro contrast. Edge-to-edge sharpness has improved, as has the haze problem. Well, don't get too close, it's still not perfect in some situations, but there's a definite improvement. The bokeh is a little bit different, and maybe you'll need to investigate it further if that's important to you. It does have a special character to it. All the images in this video are straight out of camera JPEG, zero cropping and without the conversion lenses, but I've got to say the in-camera RAW options are worth a play too. The autofocus is fine, nothing major seems to have happened from previous versions, and arguably it's working at its sensible limits given the nature of the lens design. I haven't got a big problem with the autofocus. The face and eye autofocus is okay too, if a little awkward at times. If you're a full-time manual focus shooter, you might be a bit disappointed with the fairly basic experience and lack of distance guide on the lens. I am still happy with the tilt screen. I like how discreet it is, so if you're not sure, don't worry too much. As you can see, hopefully, it barely adds anything to the size of the camera when put away. If you do have particularly big hands, as always, you'll want to try it out first to see how you get on with getting it in and out easy enough. Now, the camera might be known as a street shooter, and I'm sure for many it is, but for me it's a great everyday camera, and that's why I originally owned the X100S. It was with me every day, and I enjoyed shooting all kinds of things with it. It's an ideal camera for a stroll in the park or a trip into town. leaf shutter is a big highlight with this camera, and with the ND filter going to 4 stops, you're going to have fun with flash work at higher speeds with this camera if that's something you're into. A little flash and this camera and you're good to go. That's something I want to do more with this thing soon. Funnily enough, I'm not a huge fan of shooting street photography with a lens this wide, and having the camera in black would have been extra discreet, though this silver version does look cooler, more vintage. Finally, I would expect weather resistance to be standard with the next iteration instead of the £99 option if you go OEM with this one. Apparently you can use a simple cheap UV filter setup to get the same effect though. And after that, who knows, maybe eventually the boffins at Fujifilm will manage a nice little IBIS unit at some point. That would be really nice. People say this camera is really missing IBIS. I'm not sure, maybe we're a bit spoiled, but I expect it will come out eventually. There we have it then. It's not perfect, but for some it will be their most loved child. For an everyday camera, it's still a special choice in my mind. For street shooters, well, there is a smaller, much more discreet alternative that might work better for some of you. But I want to hear from you. Have you tried this camera out? Or how are you getting on with one of the previous versions? Let us know in the comments below. But first, make sure to subscribe, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.